Well, hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on the 26th of February 2019. Good evening everybody. Here we are at 3 minutes after 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Just want to welcome those of you who are watching from my free weather app, which you can download on Google Play or on the App Store. It's under Meteorologist Joe Chaffee, and while it focuses primarily on the area from eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, and particularly northern New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, southern Connecticut, and the lower Hudson Valley, there are tools on there that, well, you can use it from practically anywhere with regards to the radar, current weather conditions, short and long-term forecasts, and so much more, and it's absolutely free. So check it out on Google Play or on the App Store. We are in the midst of trying to figure out what appears to be a developing big puzzle for the, well, it's always a puzzle, but this one's a particularly bigger puzzle because of the fact that you've got a ton of players running around in the atmosphere, and each one of them is going to impact the other. Getting a couple of side notes before we start. I see David Allen on the chat board today. Warmest February day ever in the UK today. Got to 70.2 degrees, almost 30 degrees Fahrenheit above average. You got that ridge in Western Europe just kind of holding its own and not going anywhere, and that's keeping you very warm and pretty much spring-like, early spring for you. And thank you for the kind words, David Erickson. We're going to get into it rather strongly today and look at the upper air, because their models are doing all sorts of things in all sorts of different ways, and I kind of had an idea of where this was going to go yesterday with regards to the longer range. Now, when I say the longer range, I'm talking about through the weekend and into next week. Now I'm not so sure, and it's okay to be that way. There are times when you look at weather maps and you kind of have to take a step back and wonder, okay, I really don't have a good grasp as to what is going to be happening here going forward. This is not unusual. When you've got a lot of weather systems running around, particularly leading it with the big storm that moved through the Great Lakes this weekend and is now sitting near and moving east of Newfoundland very, very slowly, you're going to have rather chaotic views of the runs of the weather models, and I think that's where we're at this point. So everybody be patient. We're gonna go through this. We'll start with the ultra short range, because we do have a system that's going to be unfolding in the eastern part of the United States, so we're going to take a look at that front and center here. And there we go. We've got winter weather advisories, the first round of advisories going up for the northern counties of Pennsylvania, a good chunk of New York State, Connecticut except the immediate coast, so basically along and north of Route 15, and western Massachusetts. Not up for eastern Mass yet. More advisories will be added to this as we go through the day tomorrow. There's a timing issue because some areas in New York State are going to get some snow coming in tomorrow morning, and then that area is going to push eastward for tomorrow night. So I can understand why advisories don't necessarily need to go up at this moment if your start time is going to be past, say, 24 hours. I think that's the criteria with that. And of course, we've got advisories back up through much of Michigan, 2/3 of the state of Michigan. The southern part is out of it. The southernmost part is out. And, well, Wisconsin's not new to advisories and warnings this winter, so you got some more that are up tonight for a good chunk of the state, except the southwestern part and the southernmost part. We also have some winter weather advisories up for parts of southwest Missouri into southeast Kansas and into central Oklahoma. And then, of course, out in the west, where it remains very, very busy, we have winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories up for a good chunk of Oregon, Northern California, and then those advisories and warnings from Oregon, extend eastward into Idaho and parts of Wyoming and Montana. So all of that with that moisture that's coming into the west. So we're going to take a look at some of these very active satellite views. I say this many times. I always like looking at these maps that are from the Weather Prediction Center. They usually have a pretty good handle on rainfall amounts over the next 7 days, and they also give you a good feel for, they can give you a good feel of over what the overall pattern is going to be and what it's going to produce. And, excuse me, just a little bit stuffy today. You've got a fairly large area of rain across the Gulf states and off the southeast coast. So you kind of know that there's some kind of jet that's running across the southern states and heading out to the east. We do have precip on the order of about 3/4 of an inch to an inch being indicated on up through New England. So it's hinting that either some northern involvement is there, or perhaps if the circumstances are correct, maybe a little bit of southern moisture gets involved at some point in this 7-day stretch. You start to go up toward the Great Lakes in the colder air, so you've got drier amounts all under a 1/4 of an inch for that matter. And then you're looking at very wet conditions, and of course in the mountains in California and the Sierra Nevadas, you're talking about big snows over the next 7 days with liquid amounts of precip on the order of 5, 6, 7 inches or more running up through northeastern California. And then you've got some heavier precip, and this is all cold air now that you're dealing with, in Oregon and back over through Idaho and Montana. So at the very least, you are seeing the models kind of struggling with this pattern that we are going to be going into because of the fact that you've got so much nonsense running around. Let's start first off with the U.S. satellite view, so we can take a look at the east. Front and center is on the upper right. You can pick out the western part of this major storm that hit the Great Lakes, and of course made the brought the big wind machine to the northeast and back through the Great Lakes, and that is beginning to slowly but surely pull away to the northeast. The gradient is finally starting to relax, at least over me, and very shortly will be relaxing over a good chunk of southern and western New England, and they'll continue to relax as you move into May. Now this system's important because if it gets out of the way, if it's a little slower in getting out of the way as it moves to the east, it might impact the follow-up system that is moving across the Great Lakes. So you can see the brighter white cloud streaks there in the northern plains to the lakes, and that's all moving eastward. All of that is part of that western energy that has been coming in and continues to fly in. Meanwhile, you've got a couple of systems in the south that are front and center. You've got an area of clouds in the eastern Gulf of Mexico and over Florida, so you've got a bit of a shortwave trough that is moving through there, and you've got another shortwave trough in the western Gulf that is part of the mix. So you have all these different weather systems in the United States kind of playing off each other. So how the outcome of one is going to then play a role in the outcome of the other and the outcome of the one that follows. And the feeder of all of this is that that stream of moisture that you see out, excuse me, sorry again, just a little bit stuffy, out moving into the western part of the United States, where we've got a ton of clouds and a ton of precip that's coming inland. So we're going to take a look at that that satellite. I'm going to switch over now to the GOES West view, and it's a this is really very interesting. How much is actually going on in the Pacific? We were showing you this yesterday. Toward the middle part of the picture, but kind of leaning slightly to the right of center, is an upper low and storm system that is sitting out there, and as it rotates, you're pulling up. You continue to have this strong feed of tropical moisture from the deep tropical Pacific moving northeast, and all of that moisture is just finding its way into the west coast. And then you look on the left side, you've got some more action going on here with a lot of clouds and energy dropping down southward from something that's probably up there in the Aleutians. The rotation of the clouds, these pictures are great because you can see the lower clouds at the bottom moving in one direction, the higher clouds at the higher levels of the atmosphere moving in the other direction. So the west is busy, and the Pacific is very busy. So all of this stuff going on out here going to have a big impact on the weather going forward. Here's a surface map tonight, and I'm going to start with, we're going to go up into east of Newfoundland. There's our low. Whoops, got a little too tight there. But here's our low pressure center down to less than a 964 millibar low. It's a 962 millibar east to the northeast of Newfoundland, and again edging very, very slowly away. But if it's even a handful of miles slower, it's probably going to have an impact on the follow-up system. The gradient still fairly tight until you get to about, we'll use the isobar that is running through New Hampshire and into eastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So from there east, the gradient is still pretty tight. From there west, it has relaxed. And then when you jump into New York State, you start to get into the high that is stretched across the Great Lakes and back up through the upper peninsula of Michigan and through northern Minnesota. So there's the core of this, cold high. Colder air is draining southward down through upstate New York, and that cold air is going to be moving down into my neck of the woods tonight, where we'll see temperatures down in the teens and even the single digits in a lot of places. And then as we move out to further west, you begin to see the complex of lows that run from Idaho and across parts of Colorado, and of course we're seeing some snow streaking out ahead of this north of the low center where you got these east winds. And the front from the low in Idaho just kind of snakes back to another low that's analyzed in northeastern California. And that is, of course, you got all this lower pressures as you go out into the Pacific Ocean. And there's a 1001 low sitting out there well to the east of San Francisco. But it's part of the feeder mechanism to bring that moisture into Oregon. Look at some of these temperatures, by the way, even some of these coastal temperatures from the observation at 4 o'clock this afternoon. We're looking at readings that are in the low and mid 30s, some lower 40s right along the immediate coast, but low and mid 30s just inland, and 20s and teens as you go even further inland. Same goes for Washington State. So very chilly air here that's lodged in. It's kind of coming over the top of all this and draining on the backside of these surface lows that are running up in Idaho and on up also into Colorado. Meanwhile, across the south today, not too shabby, pretty decent in some places, 50s to near 60 across the Tennessee Valley with dew points in the 20s, temperatures in the low 70s with dew points in the upper 40s and low 50s, down into parts of Georgia and Alabama, although I'm seeing from the observations, certainly from the satellite, that you've got some cloud issues here. And then you get down into Florida where you've got your 70s and 60s dew points, and same for the Florida Panhandle and back down into southeastern Louisiana. There's a front being analyzed out in the Gulf of Mexico, and there's down along the coastal bend of Texas, you're getting into some tropical dew points here in the upper 60s with temperatures in the lower 70s. So, there is moisture down in this area that's trying to make some progress. And when we look at the radar loop tonight, there are two distinct areas of rain going on. One over the state of Florida, a lot of activity today in the state of Florida, up and down. A steadier rain as you head up towards Tampa, St. Pete, and points east. That still continues to stream in eastward. And a little bit of rain getting into parts of the Panhandle. And then you jump out in the western Gulf where we have that other short wave, and we're seeing some heavier rains and even some thunderstorms there breaking out in parts of southeast Texas as you got that impending warm sector that is pushing northward. And now we're starting to see some of the snow that came in to the west over the last couple of days is beginning to streak over the Great Lakes. We've got this lead area of snow that's moving fairly quickly across Wisconsin and into Michigan. And there are other streaks of snow on the radar through parts of the Dakotas, back through Montana, And then, of course, very busy here in Northern California for the second day in a row, with heavy rains just continuing to move inland and in the mountains there in the Sierra Nevadas. And as you go northward up through northeastern California, a lot of that is falling as snow, and then they're going to measure it in feet when it's all said and done. And you've got this activity in Oregon. So the West is really very important in this whole play that we're dealing with going forward. So let's take a look at the first weather system that is going to be coming into the eastern part of the United States. And the GFS picks this up all too well. And you can also see on the upper right the last of the isobars with the storm that is out near Newfoundland, and where the gradient is still very tight in southeastern Canada over Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Busy winds there. High pressure is building in, so the gradient relaxes, and now we've got this first system. There's a little weak low here by tomorrow morning, sitting somewhere in western Illinois with snows being indicated over the Great Lakes. That lead arm kind of extends its way into northern Pennsylvania and just to the north and west of New York City by tomorrow afternoon. But I think because the air over here is so dry that some of that lead snow is going to initially have a very tough time reaching the ground. In the meantime, you've got more action in the west. Here comes the next, here comes more rain, more snow, and more energy coming into the west, and then we have those short waves in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the whole pattern is just very weak looking. It's flat, so these systems are not really going to develop very much. You're just going to have to work with the moisture you have. The issue here in the east with this lead system is, again, if this storm that's out to the northeast is just a little bit slower to get out of the way, it could mean this system winds up tracking a little bit further to the south. In general, it's not going to change much in terms of the outcome. It's just that it happens that, at least in the area that I forecast for, that the southern edge of the snow is cutting right through here. So it's kind of important that I figure out exactly where that southern edge is, even though we're only talking about here a coating to an inch or two on the bottom side of this. The low that's coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, this weak low, weak shortwave, is evident here. It's very diffuse in terms of how it looks on the plot as far as the map is concerned. But you've got that northern energy, that southern energy coming out. But again, the pattern is so flat that just eventually just one low takes over, which is where you see it here, that closed 1014 isobar. So there's a weak low sitting well off the New Jersey coast early Thursday morning. The area of snow that moves through New England will be on the order of, 2 to 4 maybe. Maybe a few spots might go a little bit higher, perhaps a little bit lower. Might be some higher amounts in western New York when that system goes through, because there's a little enhancement here that's happening with the shortwave as it moves eastward, ever so slightly, but at least it's enough. And the flow coming in from the east. And then that low just moves out. So it's whatever falls tomorrow night. Again, I've got that one little struggle with regards to the southern edge. And I have the line somewhere in New Jersey, if you're watching, between I-90, 195 and Route 78 being the southern edge. If we have to move it up or down a little bit, it's going to impact amounts. And then that low moves out, and you've got that second. Remember, we've got this second weak shortwave in the Gulf that's going to try to push northward. Some models do a little bit more with the precip than others, bringing it up into Maryland and southern Pennsylvania and even into southern New Jersey early Friday morning before it dissipates. The GFS is not really doing very much with this. I'm not overly enthused by it all. It's just that when you're dealing with a situation like this, where you've got a lot of weather systems and some of them coming very close together, clearly there's going to be some feedback from the system leading it. So you have to start being a little suspect of the models, even out only to 48 hours. You really have to start being suspect of the models beyond 72 and 84 hours. You're always a little bit suspect, but I think you're in a position here where you could be a lot suspect. And then we go into the weekend, and we've been kind of struggling with this idea of low pressure coming out. And I've been thinking that, you know, like the other systems, when I look at the surface and look at the upper air, it looks like it wants to go up to the west side of the Appalachians, and the isobars are kind of pointed up in that direction, but the profile here is just so weak that you just wonder whether that's going to be the case. There's some kind of low here up east of Lake Huron. You have this broad isobar that's closed off with some lower pressures up in southeast in Canada near Toronto, for example, and then probably some other kind of low that's on the southern end of this as a big high is coming down. We're now into Saturday afternoon, and we're generating snows, if the GFS is correct, on the 96 hour, and I don't know that it is, across East Kansas and on through Missouri and in through Illinois and Indiana. I'm going to get into the upper air issues with all this, but I want to at least give you an idea of what's going on here at the surface. You have this cold, very cold high coming down. That air that is coming down out of Canada into the northern plains and the western lakes is a very cold air mass indeed for this time of year. This low on the GFS on the late afternoon run was actually a bit flatter. It was trying to take it up toward western New York and going northeast from there. You know, now it's got a flatter wave that runs across Maryland and then heads up into the Gulf of Maine with a trailing front that runs from there southward into the Gulf of Mexico. I don't honestly. I'm not sure if this is the right way to go with this. There's again the fact that you've got all this noise on the maps with all these weather systems running around makes it a bit problematic. If you're asking yourself right now, because I can't see you guys on the chat, but if you're asking yourself, well, what about the European? What about the European? I will get to that. Okay, so let's look at the upper air, and I pulled out various model views here with what's going on. If you think back to yesterday, we talked about the fact that you've got this storm that's east of Newfoundland pulling out, and we have another upper low that's rotating around it, kind of dropping back near Lake Winnipeg in south central Canada. You have that energy coming in from the west. Now, this was the Icon model's view, where that energy coming in from the west basically gets picked up by the strengthening upper low that's rotating around in the Great Lakes, and that would cut a low up toward the eastern lakes and take it into southeastern Canada, which, by the way, the Icon is still doing this. The other option, and there are a couple of options, the GFS has the northern system influencing this lead shortwave, but it doesn't quite phase it. So it's got this sort of flatter look to it, where maybe you shoot a primary that tries to go up the west side of the Appalachians, and perhaps there'll be another low that forms closer to the coast that runs up with it. That would be the GFS's idea. The European's got a different look with this, because the European basically keeps that upper low. If you'll notice how the two models with the Icon, you see how the upper low is oriented in a north-south position here. The European's got this kind of flat, sitting like an egg on its side from east to west. So the shortwave in that northern stream just kind of gets ejected along. So as a result, you wind up with a low that goes up toward James Bay, and then the southern part of the jet stream shoots out a shortwave trough, which I've got drawn here. This is for Saturday, with a low that is off the Carolina coast, and that runs out the way the model wants to show it anyway, and that runs it out to the northeast. Now, how is this all going to play out with respect to the longer term? All right, well, let's look at what's happening out in the Atlantic, because I think this is where some of the answers, not all of the answers, lie. And with regards to the European model, there's a big difference in how the European seems to be handling the features in Canada versus the GFS. And the biggest difference is the fact that out in the central Atlantic by Monday morning, the GFS has this little cutoff low that's sitting out there at about, I don't know, that's about 45 north and roughly about 50-ish west, okay? That upper low dropping in that position creates a ridge that develops along 60 west and tries to push up north. So, as a result of that, you've got an upper low sitting over James Bay, and you'll notice that you can pick out two definable short waves. They're not overly defined, but they're defined enough when you look at the European. The European's got, you know, I guess the best way to describe it is it's got a defined system where you can pick out, you know, these spokes that are coming around. And it could lie in the fact that you've got this deep trough in the central Atlantic. By the way, for those of you who might be watching from the UK, you'll notice the dark blue on the upper right. So you've got a big change coming in your weather. I haven't really been paying that much attention with the weather in Europe lately, but just taking sort of sneak peeks here and there. But that looks like your ridge position is going goodbye, and you're getting into a trough there that is coming in from the northwest. So you're going to see some changes. But back to, you know, what we're talking here with regards to the European model. That low in the central Atlantic is really important, because when you look at the GFSs for the same time frame Monday morning, it's got a completely different look. It's got a ridge in the central Atlantic that runs all the way up. Still, you have that deep trough that's over in northwestern Europe and toward England and Ireland, but you've got this ridge up in the middle. And you'll notice if you look at the upper air on the GFS, the structure of the upper air, it looks like a blob. I mean, it's just kind of spread out all over the place. You can't really pick out the short waves all that well. The flow has a bowling ballish look to it, and that keeps things, you know, on the flat side to a large degree. It's hard to see what comes out of this and how it comes out. So here's the European, you know, better defined. You pick out the short wave that's up here in Minnesota down into Nebraska, and another one that's running into the eastern lakes through Ohio and into North Carolina. So from this is where the European today tries to take some kind of low up the coast or just offshore. We'll run it. I'll run the European model in a second. Let me just finish with the GFS, because the GFS kind of takes this along, and yeah, it does develop a wave on Monday, well, you know, along the southeast coast that takes it out to the east. It's kind of suppressed. Knowing the GFS's ability to suppress things, if you're a snow lover, I probably would be happy to see this, because I would rather see this and have it try to come back further northwest than have it produce a snowstorm on the map now 150 hours out, because you know it's not going to look that way. There's a lot of room here for models to really change in a lot of different directions. And I'm not suddenly in love with the European either. Let me make clear that that broken clock has been broken for a while, and you just wonder if it's deciding, is it deciding now to pick its moment to be right twice a day? You know, I'm a firm believer in kind of sticking. When you see something that works, you try and stay with it. Now here's the European surface map, the limited view that we have for Friday, with low pressure off the southeast coast. You know, this is Friday now, so this is that weak system that comes in Thursday night, Friday morning, with a little bit of snow into Maryland and northern Virginia perhaps, and that moves out. But it does have, you know, another system that it's picking out, approaching the Texas-Oklahoma panhandle, which it just sits there. Friday night it develops, you know, you got another, this is I'm sorry, this is the GFS. Let me just switch to the European. Okay, that's the GFS. So here's the European. Weak low off the Carolina coast. You know, lower pressures back through Colorado. You've got this high sitting in southern Vermont. So this is on Friday. Saturday, it's got a low there right east of Virginia. It just barely moves. So you wonder whether this is going to mean for some precip here on Saturday, although I would think that the lower levels might not be that cold here with the high going out. But then you've got this other energy that's moving into Colorado, again, more of that western energy. Then that gets suppressed pretty far to the south into the western Gulf as this big high comes down for Sunday. And the European, we are now in 144. So remember, we're going into 144. So remember, we're entering the period where the European has been horrible with stuff. It's been showing accumulating snows every day for the last, I don't know how many weeks in its long-range runs, and none of them have happened for the most part. So we'll take this out now. From Sunday, it's got a low, a pretty decent surface low sitting off the New Jersey coast and south of Long Island. So this would imply the potential for some snow from Washington to Philadelphia to New York City to Boston Sunday night and Monday. Again, we're at hour 144, day 6 in the long range. I would be really highly suspect of this, and I am. But the difference between here and, say, the GFS for the same time period, again, remember, you probably want to see something flat into the southeast because it gives the GFS room to maneuver. But I am highly suspicious of this, and I'm going to remain highly suspicious of it. My initial idea was that the system for Saturday was just going to wind up cutting up to the lakes, and I'm still kind of holding on to that notion, some kind of primary system that goes up there. And then, of course, after 168 hours, it's out east of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So you got this fast-moving low that moves up. Let me show you the icon model, okay? Because I've been watching it on and off lately. It actually has not done that badly. But the icons view for the weekend, of course, here's our snow. It's a little more robust with the snow for Wednesday night into Thursday morning in the Northeast, ever so slightly, and then goes out. Then you've got this system for Friday, Thursday night, Friday morning. Gets the snow up into southern half of Pennsylvania, southern New Jersey, and into Maryland, and then it just falls apart after that. And now we've got the system for Saturday, and you can see that this model continues to want to shoot a low up toward eastern Lake Huron, not especially deep, but it does want to take a low there. You know, my mind looking at all this is that kind of makes sense to me. And then the front moves out, and that's as far out as we go. So we can't really see much beyond this. Just to maybe we get a quick. And look at this flow in the upper air. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, it's just. It's like looking at a stack of pancakes. Okay, it's as flat as you can have it. And the northern part of the trough here, the northern part of the jet here, is also pretty flat. So, you know, I wonder how you're going to get the Europeans' view with an upper air like this is beyond me, at least from the world of the icon. And I'll roll it back, and you can watch the progression. Watch the dark red-brown streaks across the plains as they move eastward. So this is the system that we're looking at for Wednesday night into Thursday morning. It just rolls right along. You've got shortwave energy in that southern stream rolling right along. Now here's the energy on this shot here, early Friday morning. You can see the energy in the northwest that's coming down and moving east. And now you've got that upper low. You see how it swings that upper low around, and it picks up that energy and tries to lift it up towards the Great Lakes. This is a different view from the GFS, for example, which I'll bring up the GFS's view. There's your upper low swinging around, and it just kind of, the GFS just kind of shoots that energy east. It really doesn't phase it until it gets up into eastern Canada. And then you got another short wave digging down and around. This is where the European comes into play, because when we look at the limited view of the Europeans 500, and a little bit of a data problem here, but there's the European for Friday. Western energy coming into Oregon. Saturday, it's shooting up into the western lakes, so it's getting ejected way up to the north of what the other models are doing, taking it up towards James Bay. So this is where you wind up with room, and now you've got a stronger shortwave that comes in for Monday that's rotating down and around, and that's what makes this low that it shoots up from the Gulf states and just offshore. Again, as I said, there's too many players here on the field. too many players on the field here to even come to any kind of idea as to how this is going to go much beyond Thursday night into Friday morning. So let me just get you guys back into the picture here. And there you have it. So, this is, again, as I said at the beginning, this is one of those moments where you are, you look at all these, you look at the weather maps, you look at everything that's going on, and you just kind of throw your hands up and say, right now, I really don't have any idea how this is all going to play out. So, Matt M., you saw the Uke bet. I didn't see it, so you're saying the Uke bet was about the same as the Euro. Well, at least it's getting some support from somewhere. But I have to tell you, the confidence level on the European model for me right now is way down at the bottom of the list. Excuse me, at the bottom of the list. So I always like the Uke bet as a sort of a tiebreaker as far as looking at what the models do. A Uke bet sometimes does pretty well and hits a few that hits home runs. Braden Cotty, you're one of the. You were at the, yes, very nice. Oh, thank you. I had a really great time today, Braden. I was at the. I was at one of my local elementary schools in my neighborhood, the Hawkins Path Elementary School in Selden, New York today, and the youngsters, the budding meteorologists in the 4th grade, had their weather station installed. Their bug weather station was installed today, and it was a wonderful thing to see. And the kids asked for some, they asked terrific questions. They were very well behaved, I might also add. And very smart questions. I really, really enjoyed it, and it was a pleasure for me to come out. And maybe one day I will, they'll invite me back. I'll come out again. You're right in the neighborhood. I can almost walk to your school. Let's see. Just riding through some of the chat here. Let's look at the long range. That's the one thing, the long range, because I've been on the idea that we're going to eventually go back into the Pacific jet mess, and I want you to take a look at this as we watch it evolve. We'll look at the Europeans' view with the Pacific jet, and just notice now we're only 10 days from now, but you notice how the jet it has a bit of a chaotic look here, but you don't have that fire hose going all the way across. Well, right toward the end of the period, you suddenly start to see this fire hose getting back into play from Japan, going east-northeast to almost off the California coast. You still have this deep upper low in eastern Canada and a trough that's approaching the west coast. But let's take a look at the GFS in the long range and see if it continues what it's been doing for the last number of days now. And in fact, as we get toward the end of the forecast period, much like the earlier runs, you've got that Pacific jet just taking over. We're now into the middle part of March. You've got the ridge back in the eastern part of the United States with troughing in the west, and that fire hose flow all across the Pacific. So again, the snow lovers, your time is ticking. If you don't do something between now and the middle part of next week, I think I think it's going to be done for the winter season with regards to snow chances. The I-95 corridor specifically, because that's the stretch from Portland, Maine, to Boston, to New York City, to about Philadelphia. Philadelphia's had average snowfall this time of year, average snowfall for the winter, and Washington and Baltimore have had either average or above average snowfall. So I'm not even counting you guys. The area it's the areas from north and east of Philadelphia and going inland of the coast by about 75 to 100 miles in that belt, running through southern New England and on up to eastern Mass and toward southern Maine near the coast. the snowfalls have been running below average. So if you don't do it now, you're not going to do it. So I guess you're going to be rooting up and down that the European is right. I again, the word of the day is caution big time with respect to the models. Until they can figure out what all these little pieces are doing, you're not going to be able to even remotely figure out what's going to happen over the weekend and into next week. You're going to have to give it at least a couple of more days for models to settle on a reasonable solution. Francis 89, I'm right with you. After the Pacific zonal flow will establish itself after next week. I agree with you completely. And Michael Lazara, local forecaster on Channel 2, said tonight could be a big snow. In a winter where in the coastal areas, where it's been an absolute struggle just to see snowflakes and snow showers. It's only snowed 1/10 of an inch or more in New York City, I believe 5 times. If Scott Briller's stat that he gave that he put up back days ago, it's only done it 5 times, and that includes what fell in November. So that I would come out on a Tuesday and talk about the potential for a big snow next Monday. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I mean, I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that. You might then turn around. You could turn that around and say and accuse me of not making a commitment. I just don't think it's I just don't think it's wise, even in a good pattern, to put a snowstorm on the table 6 days in advance. There's way too much going on, and I'll bet you that the next model runs will come out and move the chess pieces around in a different way. I also want to go back to this system for tomorrow night into early Thursday with respect to the folks that are concentrating on my area. I think the slight concern, if you want to expend a lot of energy over the difference between a coating to an inch and a coating to a couple of inches, or a 1 to 2, 2 to 3 inch snowfall, okay, I'll give you that. So if the system that's east of Newfoundland takes its sweet time moving out, that could force that disturbance to be a handful of miles further to the south. That could make a difference in snowfall on the southern end of the snow area for somebody. David and Chloe, you live in. I'm sorry, if I were brave, I would attempt to pronounce your last name. Anushevsky. I'm hoping I got that right. I live in Baltimore. Even though we've got 16.6 inches of snow, it still feels like below average for the winter so far. Well, in reality, it's not for you, and you may pick up a little bit more of that, a little bit more Thursday night and a Friday morning if that southern system holds together as it moves up to the north. So Scott Briller's got the scorecard for the I-95 corridor. So 16.6 in Washington, 15.6 in Baltimore, 13.1 in Philly. So now you're starting to get to where it's a little bit below normal. A lot below normal. Boston, 10.5. New York City, 10 inches. So Boston is now ahead of New York City after being behind for all this time through the winter. They just finally moved ahead. It's very much an upside down year, and every year somebody's going to be in an upside down position. And Braden, by the way, if you're still on, thank your teachers again for having me over, and a big thank you to all your fellow students. I really had a great time today. Aaron Potts, I'm a snow weenie, and you're okay with being in the snow hole. Well, at this stage of the game, I have to tell you, we're at the end of February. I want the warm weather to start to come in for at least a few days so I can get out and do a little fishing and do some stuff outdoors. One of the other things around here this winter is we continue to have, and this is kind of an extension from the fall, we've had a lot of cloudy days here. We've had a lot of days where we haven't had that much sun at all, and that gets a bit depressing after a while. You know, we'd like to get at least a couple of days where the weather's really nice and sunny with, at the very least, some seasonal temperatures. But even on the days where it's been dry, we've been dealing with a lot of, you know, instability clouds from the cold air that's coming down. It's been a long time since we've had a pleasant stretch of weather lasting more than a day or two. I'd love to see a 4 or 5 day stretch of sunny days get put together, and it would be nice if it comes soon with that strengthening sun, so we could take those temperatures higher. At this stage of the game, we haven't had the winter hasn't delivered the kind of snow that snow lovers would like. It's time to hang it up. Flagstaff, 101.7 inches. It's hard to conceive. That's over 8.5 feet. That is very, very hard to conceive. Zim, nice to see you here. It feels like it's been below average since the second half of October. One of the things that this winter, at least for this area, of course we've had these bouts of cold, but they haven't really lasted very long. But the warm-ups in between haven't been anything to write home about either. The temperatures are a little bit above average, but not by a whole lot. We've had very few days that I would certainly refer to as a blowtorch type of pattern. So it's kind of made it. It just seems like it just has this feel like it's been just so long, and I just want it. I get the point where I just want it to go away. Digger 310, I'm well aware. Everybody's telling me what these other channels are saying. I cannot, in good conscience, at this point, say something like that. If you're really that confident that the European is finally this time it's going to be right, after trying to pulling out so many rabbits out of its hat, it's going to be right now. Prove it to me. If we're here Thursday and it's doing it, then we'll have a conversation with regards to what we're going to be potentially seeing for early next week. But now, no, not doing it. Francis 89, could we enter a trough-like pattern in the summertime? God, I hope not. That's the last thing I want to see as a trough in the east in the summertime. A little bit of troughing is nice to get cold fronts through from time to time, but in terms of something kind of hanging out and stalling where you wind up with rain and thunderstorms every day. And Bill Gallagher, I'm sure the Philly channels are at it as well. Oh boy. Joyce Mack, the euro will turn at the last and fall in line. It could very well be. I have no confidence in that model right now whatsoever. By the way, Bob Mason, the maps are up. Check them out. I went for a coating to an inch or so for much of the area down in lower Westchester. If the system tracks a little further south, maybe you wind up getting a little bit more. What was I was going to say here? Euro will turn at the last minute and fall into line. I forgot where I was going with that. If the euro, oh, now I remember. Aaron Potts. If the euro is consistently wrong, would that forecast, you mean the model, be eventually retired? I think the problem is the fact that you have the overall chaotic nature of the atmosphere of this winter. I think it's been more chaotic than usual, and I think that's created problems with the models, and the European in particular is just not handling things very well. And by the way, with respect to the parallel GFS model, which was supposed to come out at the end this month, at March around the 20th, they have today announced that they're not going to bringing it out on the 20th, that the biases that the model has with being too cold and producing too much snow need to be addressed. So for the time being, the operational GFS will continue until they let us know that the parallel is ready to go. So I imagine they're going to try to fix this issue. Zim, good question. Can you explain why we have so many models and there's a process of eliminating it? Well, here's the thing. Everybody's trying to build the better mousetrap. So you have all these different models that have evolved over time. Short range, medium range, long range. We went from having a handful of models to having so many that that it's almost impossible. By the time you looked through every single one of them, the forecast period that you're forecasting for would have passed you by. So I really limit what I look at. I find that, at least in social media world, different models come front and center when those models show solutions that those particular weather fans are looking for. If you're a snow weenie and none of the other models that show anything remotely resembling snow, but you find one that does, you suddenly bring that up front and center and pretend that it has credibility. And I just don't regard that as a way of forecasting. The big issue I have is the fact that, we all can look at maps and see what the maps print out, but if it's not clear to you what is going on in the atmosphere overall in terms of the jet stream, in other words, what is the current weather? What is going on now? What is the atmosphere telling you? If you don't have an understanding of what the pattern is that you're sitting in, then how are you going to figure out the variabilities of the models when they're going to be taking you in all sorts of different directions? You can't. It's a very you're just basically throwing maps up in the air without any context. And what good is that? So I'm that's why I get very involved. If you notice when we go through these models and trying to explain not just what the models are doing per se, but how the overall profile of what we're looking at, the overall flow, and the jet stream pattern, and all the intricate pieces that are impacting each other. You got to have a feel for that, because otherwise you might as well just let the model make the forecast. That's pretty much what all these weather apps that are out there. They're all automated and based on models that they're attached to, and whenever they run new runs that come out every 6 hours or wherever they come out, you find the forecast suddenly radically changed because the model radically changed. So what good is that? What good is getting a notification 1 minute that you're going to get a coating to 1 inch of snow? Only 6 hours later, it tells you it's 8 to 12, and then 6 hours later, it's back to something in between. I don't think that inspires confidence with the user, who's going to look at that and say, how come I'm getting 3 different forecasts here? They're all radically different. I have to make decisions based on these forecasts, and there are 3 different decisions here I can make. This is not helping me. So this is why I get, it gets frustrating, because you do have all these models to choose from, and your biases are going to try to take you to where the ones that give you the solution that you'd like to see versus the one that that is going to happen, or at least one that is predicting what the outcome actually will be. And that's a big struggle. That's a daily struggle that all forecasters have. Should they eliminate them? I don't know. I think we need to find a better way to use the tools without having to use you don't need 1,000 saws to cut a piece of wood. You need one good saw, okay? And that's where I think everybody's head should be at. My buddy Bill Goodman, who works at the Weather Service, I think I was having a conversation with him the other day, and he made a great point. I said, in the effort, he argued, and I think it's quite valid, in the effort to make these models really, really good, they keep throwing more and more data in them and changing them and rearranging them, that all it's really done is made them even worse. We used to have at least a certain degree of consistency back not too many years ago with the products that were out there, and now they're fudging with them and trying to make them a bit better, which is an admirable thing to do. But I just wonder if they're throwing so much into some of these things that they're winding up. The outcome is that the quality of what they produce is going down. All right, enough said. Thanks everybody. Thanks very much everyone for being here. Really, really appreciate it greatly. Once again, if you haven't done so already, let me. I'll put up the link to my weather app, which you can access either by going to Google Play or the App Store, and just search Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. But here's a shortcut that'll take you there, and the app is free. If you'd like to support the app, or if you are a real weather geek, okay, consider joining my platform on Patreon, which is starts at only $2 a month, and you'll get more weather than you know what to do with. Along with more live streams. You can direct message me at any time, and it's a great way to support what I'm doing with my live streams, my websites, my weather app, Facebook, Twitter, and everything else. So that link is up there as well. Again, that's just $2 a month. Tonight, the Joe and Joe Weather Show, we'll have that on my Facebook page at roughly 9:25 Eastern Time. We'll live stream the new NAM, so we can take a look at what it's doing with this weather system for tomorrow night. And tomorrow is Wednesday, so we'll be back tomorrow night at our regular time, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, unless for some reason I have to push it back to 6, in which case I will let you know in plenty of time. Have a great evening, everybody. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you tomorrow.